Okay, so let's go ahead and pick up over here with this paragraph. We're not going to reread the whole thing, but you'll remember that we left right here, and then we have the beginning of a sentence, which completes on the next page, which you might have already read. But let's go ahead and pick up just right here. So this shows that common usage is the criterion. So of course, I want you to underline common usage and put a triangle with double arrows over it. Put a triangle over criterion as well. Okay. Common usage is the criterion for deciding whether a definition is correct or not. So of course we want to triangle over definition and correct. And this is the principle which I shall apply to free will. Put a triangle over principle. So when you think of principle, think of a rule, criteria. You can think of the word criterion, and you can think of the word standard. Sometimes these words are used as synonyms or in an interchangeable way, although they can each have a specific meaning as well. Notice that he says principle, go ahead and put a triangle over that, because what he thinks he's done is that he's established a rule or a principle. So one thing that you can write here for extra credit is that how does this connect to Descartes? So take really good notes here. This connects to Descartes because, remember, he was trying to decide whether or not any beliefs he had that were mathematical or logical in nature, whether or not he could go ahead and claim to have knowledge, mathematical knowledge or logical knowledge. And what he did was he came up with what? An epistemic principle, an epistemic rule that he could use to decide whether or not a belief that he had, right, could count as an item of knowledge. So one thing I want you to see about philosophy is that philosophers often, or one thing that philosophers try to do in their work is to establish rules, principles, or criteria. And so Descartes creates an epistemic rule from the fact that he believes he clearly and distinctly perceives his own existence. And in Stace, he's not using a metaphysics of his own existence to create a principle or rule that he will apply to other things. He's not using his own existence, but he is using reality, and the reality has to do with common usage of terms, right? Ordinary meanings as expressed through common usage, and he's saying I'm going to use that as my principle. And what he decides is that common usage is the principle, right, that he'll use to decide what the correct definition is of free will. So to know what that principle, in order to apply that principle, he's going to continue on in his work. He says, I shall show, so notice that he's saying, I'm going to demonstrate, I'm going to prove to you, right? In other words, he's going to argue. So by the word underneath, put a triangle over show, and then let's put an arrow, and put, he is going to try to demonstrate, okay, comma, he is going to argue for, ... okay? So what is it that he's going to try to show, to argue for? He's going to try to argue for this claim. Indeterminism is not what is meant by the phrase free will as it is commonly used. So again, there's the criterion for common usage. Put a triangle over indeterminism, a triangle over and between commonly used with double arrows, and of course a triangle over free will with double arrows. So I already did this lecture on indeterminism, so I'm not going to repeat that. He says, and I shall attempt to discover the correct definition by inquiring how the phrase is used in ordinary conversation. So what words do you think I want to triangle over here, above over here? So yeah, you'll do one of those double arrowed triangles. So you'll put the triangle right here, correct definition. And then what is the other phrase that we want a double triangle over? Not double triangle, triangle with double arrows. All right, so now let's get into what I am calling section 3. In the original text, he doesn't say here's section 1 or 2 or 3. I do that because this helps me comply with standards that professors have for documents that we post. They have to meet standards of accessibility. And so we have to have, or we're supposed to have subtitles for any documents that we have. So sometimes you have to make them up as a professor, subtitles or section titles, when it comes to longer pieces of text that don't originally have subtitles or section titles. All right, so he says, here are a few samples of how the phrase, what does he mean by the phrase? Okay, you could write, do an arrow here and write free will. Might be used in ordinary conversation. Okay, so notice that he's saying, I'm going to give his samples of what? Ordinary conversation. Think common usage. Think ordinary meaning. It will be noticed that they include cases in which the question whether a man acted of his own free will is asked in order to determine, very important point here. Okay, here when he is using the word determined, you should probably definitely take some notes up here. So put your notes up here for how he's using determine up here. And what I want you to write for that part is that he is not using determine in the metaphysical sense here, okay? So in line 88, he is not using the word determine in the metaphysical sense to say that things are caused. He's using determine instead to say that, in the sense that we can decide, to reach an informed decision. That is what he means. So make sure you write all of those notes that I did, or that I write everything that I said as notes with respect to the points that I made about how he's using the word determine here. Whether he was morally or legally responsible for his acts. So we're going to do morally, legally, and notice that he said morally and legally what? Responsible. So I'm going to use an arrow to join these two, to join this to this. Not an arrow, but a branch. In other words, these two concepts are kind of a unit, and then this concept's a unit, but of course they're supposed to be together. So let's just kind of bind them all together. So he's talking about morally responsible and legally responsible. And then of course we want to put a triangle over X. Okay, so here's example 1. Jones, I once went without food for a week. Okay, so what is the event? He went without what? Food for a week. So that's going to be the event. Okay. Did you do that out of your own free will? Okay, so now there's a question. The question makes use of the concept of someone's concept or Smith's concept of free will. We don't know what that is because he doesn't tell us. Jones, no. So he says no to what? He says no to his question, and then he does what? He explains. I did it. So this is the event, right? I did it. The event that is stated by Jones by doing what? Going without food for a week. I did it goes to going without food for a week. And then he gives the reason. So here the word because is functioning as a reason. It tells us a reason in terms of, it's a reason in support of the claim that he didn't do it of his own free will, but it's also an explanation. So over here, I want you to write that this is, that this statement, the statement that begins with I did, in fact, let's put brackets around it. Put that this statement functions as both a logical reason for supporting his doing something not of his own free will. So pause the video and rewind it if you need to. And write that. But I also want you to write that this also functions as an explanation in terms of a cause, right? In other words, he is giving us the cause of his going without food for a week. So here's the cause of what? An event, okay? So he's saying that there was a cause, that this cause is of some kind of cause. It's a certain kind of cause that led to this event, and because it was this kind of cause that led to this event, he did not do it of his own free will. That's what Jones is telling us. But again, notice, no one ever tells us explicitly what the definition of free will is, but Stace is going to say that it's implied, so we'll get to that in a little bit. But suppose that the man who had fasted was Mahatma Gandhi. The conversation might have then gone like this. So here we have an example. Let's call this one example 1. Let's call this one example 2. Okay. Gandhi, I once fasted for a week. Okay, so I want you to write the word event over this phrase. Did you do that of your own free will? Okay, so again, same question, different person. Put a triangle with double arrows over free will. Yes. What does he say? Oh, and up here, actually, I should say I did it is its own bracket. And then I was lost in the desert and could find no food, because there's actually 2 statements here. And it's the second statement that is giving a reason, a logical reason in support of the conclusion that he did not do something of his own free will, but it's also the statement that provides the cause of an event. Okay, so here we have another event, and then we have, again, the same question, but for a different person, different context as pointed to up here. And then in this sense, this person says yes. Okay, so we're going to put brackets around that, and then we're going to do, sorry, I did not mean to put brackets around yes. So I did it, okay, because I wanted to compel the British government to give India its independence. All right, so in this case, he does think he did it of his own free will. And of course, the event it points to is up here. And then again, we're getting a logical reason in support of the conclusion that he did it of his own free will, but we're also getting an explanation in terms of a cause for the event that is stated in line 95. So here, he says what? I wanted, right, to compel the British government to give India its independence. In other words, he had a goal that he wanted to achieve. So why don't you go ahead and write that right here. He links free will to a want that is connected to a goal he wants to achieve. So write all that down, rewind the video if necessary. And if you haven't done so, do your triangle with double arrows right here. Okay. All right, so that's interesting, right? Same event, went without food for a week, both Gandhi and Jones, but notice how the context and what caused going without food for a week, notice how that is different from between Smith and Gandhi, right? Gandhi, he had a goal that he wanted to achieve, therefore he wanted to fast. Here, he did not have a goal which required him to adopt the goal of fasting or going without food. And in fact, he'd probably say he wasn't fasting, he was starved. Now, take another case. Suppose that I had stolen some bread, but that I was as truthful as George Washington. Then if I were charged with a crime in court, some exchange of the following sort might take place. So now we've got example 3. Did you steal the bread of your own free will? So let's go ahead and do a triangle with double arrows. Yes, I stole it because I was hungry. Okay, so I stole it. He's talking about what? Stealing the bread, right? This is a shorter dialogue. And then he says what? I was hungry. Okay, so stealing the bread is the event right here. So you can write event here. And notice that you could put event right here. I guess I do have space above. Right here we could put event. And right here, oh, I did do event up there. So the event is mentioned twice here. The event is mentioned twice here. Here, the event is mentioned up here in the paragraph, right? Stolen some bread, so that's an event. So he kind of gives you the context for the third example, but doesn't include it in the little sample dialogue. He goes straight to the question part of the dialogue. Steal the bread, of course, is the event. I stole it refers to the event of stealing the bread. I was hungry. All right, so that was what? The cause. So what do we have here? What should you write here? Cause. Okay, or in different circumstances, the conversation might run. So here we're going to do example 4. Did you steal the bread of your own free will? Okay, so same event. No, I stole. Okay, so that's the event again. Because my employer threatened to beat me if I did not. So of course we're talking about a cause. Anytime we identify a cause in any of the dialogues, we are talking about what? I said logical support for a conclusion that somebody, well, here, logical support for the idea that somebody did not do something of their own free will. Here, the cause is logical support for the idea that somebody did do something of their own free will. Here, Stacy's going to say there's logical support for the idea that somebody did something of their own free will. And here, the idea is that somebody is providing right here a statement with a cause in it as logical support for the claim that they did not do something of their own free will. But in each of these cases, the cause that is identified is logical support for some conclusion about free will, but also a metaphysical claim explaining why some event occurred. Okay, so let's go ahead and go to example 5. So suppose a man left his office at noon and was questioned about it. Then we might hear this. So here's the event, right? A man left his office at noon and was questioned about it. Okay, so the event is given in, I guess you could say, a line that's kind of like a paragraph. Jones, did you go out on your own free will? Yes, I went out to get my lunch. Okay, so then that's the cause. And here I shouldn't have underlined that, right? So the event is left his office. Okay, so next we've got, but we might hear, so same event, right? Did you leave your office, right? Did you leave your office? Go out of your office? These are all the events, right? So event. That's in the question. Of your own free will? No, I was forcibly removed from my office, so cause. Okay, so whatever I have said about the statement in which a speaker provides a cause or articulates a cause for an event, whatever I have said about the other statements like that in the other dialogues applies equally to this statement.